The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe.
I think this idea of shapeshift gave us something visually we could hook onto and musically that we could hook onto, and something, I guess, personal that the students can take with them to say, like, in life, when you get to a place where what you've been doing doesn't work for you, you can reshape your identity, you can reshape your approach, and you can still have the essence of who you are. I think that's what's also cool about it, is it feels like a Cavalier show, but it's like it's 2025 and it's moving in a new direction, and it's an awesome thing.
Those set pieces take you on the journey and they change the show. Like if you were to watch the show in a fast forward motion, you could see how every prop that moves is motivating the drill. It isn't just, oh, it's time to move the props. That's a planned, calculated effort of how does this prop move over here while still motivating the trumpets to go there. It's not random acts of set piece moving.
At least for me, my approach to sound design isn't to just put sprinkles over the top. I think of it more as like caulking the seams of the building, if that makes sense. Just like making sure that all the finishing and all the dressings, everything feels like it's one final product that you can listen to holistically.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. We're talking Cavaliers today, and I have really been looking forward to this conversation. Lindsey Vento's with us here. Lindsey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Rick Subel's here. Rick, how are you, sir?
Hey, Tim.
Thanks for being here.
I'm
And Kevin Shah is with us too. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, howdy, I'm good.
So everybody, we are going to be going behind the scenes on this cool Shapeshift show. The Cavaliers are having a great season. Everybody loves the show. Can't wait to get a little bit behind the scenes. But first off, I want to say I've been looking forward to seeing all three of you because I've talked to all of you many times before, and I love anytime I get to talk with you guys. So thank you for stopping to do this. Now, Lindsey, what is your role with the Corps this year?
This year I'm the visual coordinator at the Cavaliers.
Okay, very good. And
It's
where are
very
you?
cool to say out loud, honestly.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
Gosh, how many people get to say that? And where are you right now?
Where am I, or where's the Corps? Me?
Where are you?
I'm in Kansas City. I'm at home.
Okay, so you're at home, which is lovely. So I'm glad you're having a little bit of
This is what our dorm room looks like. Don't you know?
Yeah.
All of our Cavalier dorms come with wallpaper.
It's lovely. Well,
Yeah.
everybody, you should be watching the video version so you understand all these jokes. Now, Rick, you are with the Corps. Where are you?
We are I guess we're in Milwaukee. I don't know all the neighborhoods and stuff, but it says we're in Milwaukee, and the show tonight is in Madison, and it's a great setup. We're at Greenfield. We're in Greenfield, Wisconsin. That's what it is. We're at Greenfield High School. I'm in my literal car that I had at spring training, so I had to pick it up in Chicago and drive around this weekend. So you're actually so behind the scenes that you're in my car.
I'm totally loving that. And he was with the Corps and literally ran off the field, jumped in his car to talk with us. So Rick, thank you for doing that. Now, what is your role with the Corps this year?
I am the artistic director of the Cavaliers.
Okay, awesome. And then Kevin Shaw's with us. Kevin, you're at home, right?
Yeah, I'm at home in Southern California.
Okay, and what's your role with the Corps?
I'm music coordinator and I did the sound design.
Okay, wonderful. So, first off, guys, congrats on the show. It's awesome. Everybody's loving it. How are you feeling about how things are going?
I'm excited. I think, I hate to make it feel like it's checking off a list, but when we start a season, we have objectives that we personally want to see happen and what we want to accomplish this season. And so for us, it's been a lot of checking off those lists, creating something unique for the drum corps, creating something that the members are really proud and excited to perform, creating something that the alumni can gravitate towards and fall in love with all over again, making new fans, something that feels Cavalier-esque without it being a throwback, something that is poignant and whip smart and cool and also just beautifully artistic and creative. So for us, it was a couple of weeks ago, I sent a message to the team. It was like, high five, everyone. We did everything we were supposed to do this season. Now we have this much time left. What do we do? And so I think for us now, it's just in that mindset of seeing how far we can push the members towards excellence, making sure that their last stint of tour feels really great, that they feel taken care of, and that the show is a vehicle for them to keep growing all the way until the last minute, until they can't do it anymore. So I'm really proud of the team. I'm proud of the process of just how everyone communicates and comes up with great ideas and finds solutions to issues, and just the general professionalism and vibe of the team is really strong. And for a first outing together as a new design team, I think it's been awesome, and I'm just really proud of it all.
Well, I'm glad you just said that because that was actually the question I meant to ask first. Although I loved that whole thing. Thank you, Rick. That was great, and thank you for giving us that nugget on that. Have you guys worked together like this before, the three of you? Like, I know each of you have done many different things. Have you worked?
Not the three of us as three, but like Rick and I worked together. Kevin and I worked together. Kevin and Rick have worked together. The three of us have not worked together until now. So.
But it's a small little design world and marching world, really. So everybody knows and works with everybody. And I always try to remind everybody of all that. Don't ever burn your bridges, everybody, because everybody works and knows everybody and does it's all this.
Yeah,
so Kevin, how has it been with this combination?
It's been really, really cool. I think I was talking to Lindsay about this earlier today. I think the, in any design relationship, there's some period of kind of testing vulnerability. It takes a while before you can feel really open and feel like you can get into the weeds on something without straining a relationship. And I think that bypassing a good chunk of that early on in the process meant that we could get to the good stuff in terms of like really getting in the weeds with our creative ideas and not feel like we had to kind of tiptoe around the initial courtship, if that makes sense. And I think that really bought us a lot of like depth in the way that we pulled the show together and quickly, you know what I mean?
Well, in all honesty, Tim, like everybody loves a webinar when you talk about the elephant in the room. Let's do that. It's hard when you get a phone call that says, hey, come work the Cavaliers. And you're like, why? Like you sit and go, okay, let's talk about why. But the Cavaliers it's the Cavaliers. It doesn't matter what place they were last year. It doesn't matter what they did 10 years ago. It's the Cavaliers. It is a founding member of Drum Corps International. Had been at the table since day one. That it's almost impossible to sit and go, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna. But Rick, how he posed it when he called all of us was like, come design something really cool with your friends. And I was like, well, you put that and the Cavaliers in one thing, and you're like, I don't know how to say no to that. So that it really was like, even though the three of us, and even further, the team is bigger than the three of us,
Sure.
have all worked together before. When you look at it as come do something really cool with your friends, it's like, well, and it happens to the vehicle happens to be the Cavaliers.
Yeah.
Kind of a, you know what I mean? It's a no-brainer. Yeah.
I get that. So Kevin discussed the fact that you were able to sort of fast forward into vulnerability and trust. I would like to know, here we are going to talk about the Cavaliers show in just a minute, but I would like to know how you guys accomplished that. I know you're all super professional with a lot of experience, but do you have any tips for people trying to create this with their own team?
I think for me, you have to be a people person. You have to know, you have to be empathetic to others. And, I would assume that Lindsay and Kevin and I like different flavors of ice cream, but they're in the same style of ice cream. You know what I mean? And you can kind of tell that by your interactions and just the honesty, you know what I mean? It's like, when parents make their kids eat the peas and they just don't want to, like, we've learned that over time that, you know what I mean? It's okay to say, I don't like peas. And then to be in a supportive environment where people go, I got you. I heard that. Now, can we do something similar to peas that aren't peas? And I think that how we talk to each other and know that about each other, the fast forward, I think, is that there's an assumption among our instincts that I know if Kevin's going to like something or not. Or he knows that about me, and I know that about Lindsay, and Lindsay knows that about Kevin. So there are some assumptions we know of each other as people because we took the time to know each other as people. And that's the same for the entire staff. I feel like everyone's honest. I feel like, you know what I mean? Because you can disagree with a lot of things if you do it in a professional manner and you do it with an honest point of view, and you really, you aren't just speaking opinions, but you're speaking your own facts and versions about why a certain thing. But I think that teams learn how to be honest and also meet in the middle. So you know what I mean? I can get Kevin to get something. If Kevin doesn't like peas, I can get him close to eating peas. If I really love peas, we can find some marriage in the middle that satisfies both things, but it takes a lot of honesty about that. If Kevin would have never said, I don't like peas, then he's pushing back against something that I don't know the truth about, that I can't meet him as a design teammate, And so I think it's a little bit of that, we should all have differing opinions, because that's how you get an idea to be better than the original idea. Someone's going to have a different point of view and say, but what about this? And then the what about that becomes another and another and another. And then you're able to kind of mold and craft that idea to something better than the original idea, versus forcing that something upon someone who's not going to be able to give it back in a better version of itself. So if I kept trying to feed Kevin peas, Kevin's going to say, I'll do it, but it's not, you're going to get this version of it that's not fully authentic and real. And so I think, for design teams, I think getting to know each other and getting to know each other's tendencies or propensities or just taste in general. And sometimes people will find that, everyone's good at something, but they're better at that thing when they're in a team of people who can support what that best version of themselves is. We're not all right for all the right places, we're not all right at every place, but we're right at the right places, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And so I think that fast forward was a little bit of that. We already started the conversations with a similar point of view and an understanding about what we wanted to get out of it. But as a taste factor, it's really in the ballpark, but with different opinions, we can be honest and communicate through those. That was a long-winded way to say that.
Well, but no, you're exactly right. And the other thing about it is that we knew that we had to come in here and do something bigger than ourselves. We knew that we were coming to the Cavaliers and not just to do what is the most creative thing that we could ever do, and all of the art that's still in our head, we're going to get it out. We had a job ahead of us to make the Cavaliers again, and to do for the drum corps what it needed us to do. So there was also all the hopes and dreams and desires as a designer and a creator to do the things, but we also had a responsibility to make sure that the choices that we made were about the organization and were about the members of the Cavaliers. And I think that also played a big role, because we came in with a common vision with that. Some of our first meetings weren't, hey, what do you want to do? It was, what does this drum corps need from us right now? What does the drum corps need for us to do right now? And I think that is also a commonality that we all had.
Yeah, if I can add to the especially with drum corps, I think with marching band, maybe it's a little bit different, but I think if you looked at the spectrum of, the most conservative and maybe the most ambitious, if that's a spectrum, I think having that runway already established, it gives us the ability to avoid having, roadblocks in our creative process based on anecdotal failures, right? Because I think whenever you start new, there's a little you have to protect, the drum corps day, and you have to protect the drum corps season. You have to protect the membership. You have to protect the rehearsal time. And so we have to make sure that whatever idea that we put forward has the highest probability of achievable success, right? And so sometimes that leads to adding, some bumpers to the process.
Yeah.
And I think that when you build a relationship, I think if you look at some of the teams that have been doing it for a very, very long time, they probably don't have as many bumpers on their creative process, because they already know there's already a trust that there's going to be a standard of execution and excellence and a standard of delivery, that we can be in this ambitious space without spending a lot of effort and time on bumpers. And I think that was a big part of what went into our kind of, let's dream big, even though we know that we have to make sure that they're successful. I think we kind of fast track to the let's dream big part as well.
I
And
love that
you thought we were going to say, we just put ideas on a Google Doc and we showed up at spring training. But didn't you know it was a whole therapy session along the way, in all the good ways?
Exactly, but that's
Yeah.
what I appreciate you guys. I wanted to include this. I actually was really hoping this would be exactly what you would say, because I always like to remind people of um, the amount of responsibility and
Yeah.
history and pressure and expectation that anybody goes into when they're doing the kinds of jobs that you guys all said yes to. And it doesn't matter where you are, these drum corps all have this.
Yeah.
And so I just like to remind people, because when you're critiquing and watching and thinking about what you think of the show, I would love for you to have this in mind. Okay, shapeshift. I would love to know where this basic concept, because when I heard it and I watched it, I was like, well, this makes perfect sense for a marching show. So I would like to know what you thought, where it came from.
Um, I think for me, like I was enamored with this thought of like every show is how we shape time. Like how there's some quote and I can't remember it verbatim, but it's like, you know, this type of person does this, but artists shape time. Like they give it purpose, they give it life, they give it meaning, they give it love, they give it creativity and all of that. So I like this idea about shaping time. And I think about like, the idea of shaping is something that you can physically and musically do. And like music is just shaping air. It's shaping vibrations in the air with different, whatevers. And there's so much like theory behind all of those things, but like we're shaping things that don't exist, and so this idea of shaping kind of really resonated with me. And we kind of talked round and round about like, there's ethereal versions of it, and there's literal versions of it. And but also kind of at a pinnacle moment for the drum corps, the idea of shapeshifting is to be chameleon like. I think for me as a designer, I like the freedom to be whatever I need to be. It's like people saying Beyonce can't have a country album, and you're like, why not? She's really great at everything, and she wanted to explore that. And so I think like stylistically, groups can pigeonhole themselves by saying, well, we only play, Spanish music, or we only do this, we only play jazz, and groups become identified as that, and then they're not able to try something different or go outside of that box. So for me personally, I like to always mix it up every year and say, well, this is what I'm into this year, and this is where we're going that year. I think there's an identity that's inherent on everybody that makes things. Choreographers have a style, visual designers have a look, musical designers have a taste. You can see all those things, but I think conceptual wise, like to be able to shapeshift and be malleable and open to what the need is. And so for us, the need at the drum corps was to refresh itself. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do a show about change in general or evolving or even make it about that, but but the idea of like getting to a place and being able to get past that place means you have to reshape how you think or do. It became a motivator for how we could design a whole show from one end to the other. And it sounds dumb to say out loud, but it's like when you've done this enough and you don't want to do that anymore, what's the next new thing you can do that creates an interest? And so as the show lays out from a pacing standpoint, it's really interesting in that it doesn't sit in any one thing for so long. It always takes you on this unique journey of a new visual idea or a new developmental passage or something musically to explore, a sound. And so, in this first year coming together as a team, I wanted it to just be smartly done. I wanted it to be very just composed through, like no loose ends, like nothing. But I think this idea of shapeshift gave us something visually we could hook onto and musically that we could hook onto, and something, I guess, personal that the students can take with them to say, like in life, when you get to a place where what you've been doing doesn't work for you, you can reshape your identity, you can reshape your approach, and you can still have the essence of who you are. I think that's what's also cool about it, is it feels like a Cavalier show, but it's like it's 2025 and it's moving in a new direction, and it's an awesome thing. So that's kind of how it started and how it evolved into a concept.
Well, I love it, and I think that
Yeah.
you've accomplished these things. Like it does feel like a Cavalier show, and it looks like a Cavalier show, and it sounds like it didn't. It seemed like this was the right chord doing that. You know what I mean? Like that all seemed to
And a
work.
big piece of that, and a big piece of the programmatic choices were the set pieces, right? Like the big set pieces. And it's awesome that people now are like, oh my gosh, those are the coolest props. And I can't believe they also make a circle. And I can't believe they do all these things, I think that's a really big part. You have the individuals who are like, oh, there's so many props in the show. You've got you got the couchers, right? But I honestly feel like this show could exist. The drill by Pete Weber, amazing, and the music by Jay, Bo Cook, and Kevin, amazing, and it's all great. and it could be fun, it could live without the set pieces, but without those props, it's a different story. It's a different journey. Those set pieces take you on the journey and they change the show. Like if you were to watch the show in a fast forward motion, you could see how every prop that moves is motivating the drill. It isn't just, oh, it's time to move the props. That's a planned, calculated effort of how does this prop move over here while still motivating the trumpets to go there. It's not random acts of set piece moving. So when we lift these big, massive props in the ballad and everyone goes, gosh, it looks heavy, that looks so laborious. Exactly. That entire production is called Within. Changing from within is not easy. That's a really strenuous, laborious, exhausting, beautiful, but really heavy transformation. And so, yes, it looks heavy. It looks very Atlas-like. It looks like it's taking effort. But change within takes a lot of effort. So all of that within the visual design, just with the set pieces alone, is all so calculated in why and how and when, and having the battery jump up on those set pieces is another shape shift, right? So now we've elevated into verticality. So now we've elevated someone off the ground and we are asking the battery to stand on a prop that is unstable, that is rocking back and forth, and still be box 5 at it. I mean, I don't know if anyone can really clearly define content, but that might be on there. It's just we use it in so many ways that I feel like just from a physical standpoint of Shapeshift, the set pieces that we've included in the show and that chameleon, like Rick was talking about being a chameleon, that's exactly why, again, behind the scenes, why all of the costuming looks so similar. Why the brass and the percussion and the guard look almost identical in their costuming. It's a chameleon idea of shapeshifting. And so that's another little nugget that the community can take away and be like, brilliant.
Well, it is really smart. And I have to tell you that watching the set pieces move and transform and be used and all, like, I just love, this is how it's supposed to work, everybody. You do all these things with it that I'm expecting you to do, and then you do like 5 more things that I never would have thought of. And like this,
Yeah.
And there was even a moment, unfortunately, I haven't seen the show live yet. I've just been watching the video, but like there was a moment where somebody got rid of their flag by throwing it in the thing, and I thought, oh my God.
All of the color guard equipment, other than one flag at the very end, comes from those props.
That's
Every
amazing.
single one of them.
Yeah, it's so practical. But that was like a level up, again, that I thought, wow, they didn't just lay the flags behind the thing. Like,
Yes.
they
Tim,
did some
tell your
thinking about it.
friends.
We did some
Tim,
thinking
tell all
about it. Okay, now, before we get to Kevin, I'm going to come to you shortly and talk about music stuff. But before we do that, I always like to point out like the amount of time and thought. You just described it. The amount of time and thought that went into how are they going to move? How are we going to work this in? How is it going to motivate the drill? Can we say something about convincing people to take that extra time to think it through?
Yeah, well, like we were in November at Bands of America Grand Nationals. We were all in an Airbnb and watching each other's our shows and meeting and talking about stuff. But like we cut little props out of pizza boxes and taped them together, and like
I'm gonna find that picture.
We got on the floor and it was like, what if they started like this? And what if we moved them here? Like, we videoed this whole discussion about how the show was going to evolve, and it's with cardboard pizza props, you know what I mean, in November. But like, the thing about a show is like each thing informs the other thing. So like this visual idea of just where the props are and how it evolves through the show evolves a pacing of how the show can lay out and what moment happens when, and then the music informs that, and then the music informs the staging, and the staging informs how the prop moves, and the staging informs the music edits. That, you know what I mean? It keeps going like this back and forth, but it starts with a plan that everybody has to be clear on. We're not discovering those things as we're writing them. We have an idea about where it's going. It's like that quote, begin with the end in mind. Like we always knew. And sometimes it can be frustrating when something's not working because you're like, guys, we ever talked about this since November. Why is it not working? But yeah, I thought we had a pretty solid plan, that we felt great about. And you look at everybody and it's like, do we all know the plan? And it was like, yes, we know the plan. And then everybody was able to operate in their own departments with this plan in mind of how it was going to work. So yes, take the time, take as much time as it needs to make sure that the plan and the foundation of how everything's going to lay out is super solid. But that caveat that by saying, like, does everyone understand what we're trying to get this moment to do? And if all the design team says, yes, I understand what this moment is supposed to be, then they'll be able to do that. You can't assume that everybody has a clear idea and that everybody's idea matches each other's idea. Someone may have a wildly different interpretation of that where you're like, well, this is nothing like what I thought we talked about, you know? So take the time to discuss it and make sure that the plan is solid, but that everybody really understands what it's supposed to do.
I don't know if you can see this, but we literally built the prop out of a pizza box that we had destroyed the night before. We built props on pizza boxes, and then we taped them with some tape we found in this Airbnb. And then, I mean, literally like the percussion thing I was just talking about, we just had these little things like rocking on this table. But like, and we did, I mean, we were like talking, we could put equipment here. I mean, when you're planning something like that, it's okay to get into the weeds early on things like that. It's okay. It's okay to think about, it sounds like worst case scenario, but it's really just thinking ahead. Like, what could go wrong if we did X, Y, Z? And then how would we recover from that? Or, you know, what's the worst that could happen? And then how do we make it the best that could happen? So I think planning is key. And we've all seen those shows. We've all been a part of those shows. I'll raise my hand. We've all been a part of those shows. We're like, didn't really think that one through.
Oh yeah.
That was great fun. You know, we've all been a part of that. So yeah.
Well, and my favorite thing about what you just said is that it confirms one of my premises for all show design, which is that all great show designs and show design meetings involve pizza. So this is really helpful. I like this. I mean, really, it's a life thing. Okay, Kevin, it seems less obvious to me. I know that there's shaping in music, but it seems less obvious. And not that that's good or bad, but like I'm wondering what challenges that pose as you're trying to decide what music to play and how to put it together with these concepts.
Yeah, I think from a timeline perspective, the shape shift idea, like the actual like package of the show, didn't really crystallize until we actually had a lot of music kind of picked out. We were actually toying with a couple different conceptual centers. And throughout the process, we were gravitating to different source materials. And I think, part of the beauty of this whole process is we have a lot of people on the team that are actually really, really capable. I mean, with Jay Bocook, we had Josh Brickey and Lee Allman doing all the percussion. We had Dan Schmidt heading up audio. We have Matt Stratton and team leading the brass. And we have Tom Angst and Brett Kuhn. We had a lot of voices like kind of contributing at the beginning in terms of like ideation, aesthetic, and that sort of thing. And so we had a pretty monumental list of music that we all loved in some facet. And so part of my role was to kind of take all of those ideas and start to filter them down into pieces that we all felt we knew could fit. We called them buckets. Like here's a potential movement 1 bucket, a potential movement 2 bucket, etc. And so we had a couple top contenders for each one. And so as the ideas started to crystallize, I think we gently just gravitated to the selections that we did. And because they've all felt like within, I think Rick and Lindsey and visual team did a great job of, as we were crystallizing the idea of saying, hey, here's some of the types of effects we could do in this bucket. And here's some of the types of effects we could do for the ending. And I think that really encouraged us to say, hey, based on those ideas, I think this piece of music could have the most potential to fulfill or realize those ideas. So it's a really like organic back and forth. And I think for me, that's like the most special kind of process. I know that there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think that discovery is just more fun for me versus saying, not that I'm not closing the door to this process, and I'm sure I'll be a part of this kind of process in the future. But, if we said, hey, we're going to do Alice in Wonderland. And so now all of a sudden, all of your musical choices are somewhat, siphoned into a very specific category. And I think it was really special to have like a little bit more of an open category for each movement. And then as the effects started to crystallize, I think the music kind of wrote itself almost.
Yeah. I think like if I were to call it a script, right? Like we knew we talked through an evolution of the props and what would be the most interesting way to shape the environment of the field with these props, right? That was one of the first things that laid down the foundation of the script. And then there were also descriptive words. It's like, well, what does the opening sound like? What does it feel like? What are colors associated with that? Like, and then what are the literal drum corps things that we can do? Like the first brass entrance has to be, and then we would describe that, or and how would we get to that? And so we have this idea of like these sort of fake outs, these building up to an expectation and then going in a different direction. Because shapeshift to me was that you take people to where you think they're going to go, and then you shift it and you go in a different direction. And so the anticipation of that first brass entrance was a planned thought. I wanted to see all the color guard on rifle, and we wanted to use verticality with the props, and so we start giving tangible things, like Kevin said, in these buckets. But there were always very clear we didn't know what it even was called, but we knew we wanted it to do these things and it would feel like this. And then while we're getting music and while we're thinking of where these effects and the visual planning is going to go, we start saying the words over and over again. We had a couple of show titles that we would say it out. I would be like, you know what, for this meeting, let's just say this is the title to see if it sticks, and so it becomes we knew we were going to shape time. We knew we wanted to shape the environment. The show was about shaping and all these explorations of shaping. But shapeshift was one of the last things that it was. Once it's finally identified itself for what it is, then you have a name for that. So it's kind of the opposite version of what Kevin just said about Alice in Wonderland, But I think for us, what's important for me, right, is that everything that we're doing on the field is shaping and shifting. It's tangible things. It's not like let's do a show about flight. And my first criticism with that is like, but nobody can fly. And it's like, what tangible pageantry effects can you do with that? You know what I mean? And so for us, we wanted the origin of the concept to be all of these tangible things that we can do musically, visually throughout the show.
Yeah, what I love about what you just said is what all of you just said is that it all goes right back to what you said at the beginning, which is these are our goals for the Corps and what it needs and what we need to do, and here's what we're trying to accomplish. And then you describe this process with that premise very clearly, and that all makes sense to me. And I think you did it, and I do think that you've accomplished, as I said before, all those things that we wanted for the Cavaliers this season. So I love that. Now, Rick, when I had the wonderful opportunity to talk to you and Andrea back in the spring. You were so nice to talk to me, and everybody, you can find that on my Call Me Beast channel. And we were talking about experimenting. You said, I like to come up with something to do, something to figure out, right? And we were talking about all these different shapes of flags, oh, what if the whole flag's on the end of the pole, whatever. Well, I'm watching this show and I'm like, oh, look at all the shifting they did with the shapes of the flags. And I thought that was very cool. And you sort of talked about that, so I was tuned into it. But I love that there were these interesting choices for the guard equipment in that way.
And shout out to Sarah Solomonson, who did all the graphics for those, because she is brilliant beyond brilliant. And without her graphic design expertise in that, I don't think things would have read the same way. So shout out to Sarah.
Oh yeah, and the flag with the hole in it, the way it's designed visually is so beautiful. I love that piece of that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I remember that call in the spring. It was a fun conversation. But what I was trying to get at was sometimes you build in something that causes it to not be typical. The shaping of the flags is an easy one, where the choreographers, they visually dream up the parts in a different way than they would if it was just a standard flag, And when I think about pageantry in general, it's like everybody plays loud. Everybody plays fast. Everybody plays lots of notes. Everybody moves fast. Everybody has a prop. Everybody has all the things, but it's like, well, what signature or unique about what your approach is to that thing, And I think those, again, as a defining element of a new team coming together, if we always look at it at loud is loud, but what does it mean? How did you get there? What is the story that loud tells? What is it's cool that you can play all the notes, but what does that mean in terms of its value of experimentation or whatever it is? And so for me, the props were a big one, because it's all right, we dream about what possible, right? We knew it would hold all the equipment. We knew that they could rock. We knew they could go to vertical rainbow position. We knew we could slide them. We knew we could put them together. That was the goal of having a prop that had multifaceted capabilities. But then you get in the minute of working with it, and as much planning as you have, you're like, we need a whole day. We need a whole day to work on this because there's a lot going on in there. And like, what I think's cool about it too is like it caught in the first year, right? It caused the entire team. Oh, hi.
How are you? Our lead designer here decided to join us today. She's so cute.
I would say Kevin's daughter is pretty inspirational. And
look at her though.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so since we're say hi to Kevin, tell us who we're saying hi to.
Oh, this is my little sweetie, Amrin. Say hi.
Hi,
Emran.
Emran.
Well, thank you for saying hello. You're so beautiful. I'm sure you inspire your dad to write great music, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, sweetie.
Oh, I'm glad she came to say hi. So, Rick, I'm sorry. No
Well,
worries.
no, what I was just saying is like you build in these things that cause the team to have to come together, not to problem solve, but to say what can we do out of this? And there's places in the show where like, I'm a saber and I hand it to a baritone player who does a ditty and puts it in, and someone else takes that saber out 2 productions later. Like there's a whole inner networking of this stuff. And for me, I kind of giggle because I know it's hard and it's frustrating, but it's like, as a first year, if we can get past that, we can build anything, and I think that's been really brilliant how everybody, sometimes people will guffaw and like, it's like, we need to clean this stuff today, but we've got to do this production stuff. It's like, we're, none of that feeling where everyone was just willing to say, what do we need to do? How do we, how much time do we need to spend on it? And so I think like, I'm giggling because it's like, we accomplished a lot of challenging things in the first year that I think enable us to do a lot of, not, I don't want to say more challenging, but like, we know we can work together to problem solve that type of stuff. So like experimentation at that point will be easier because we have a trust in each other about how to get to the solutions. And, and sometimes those parameters, they cause a new idea like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's really cool. That's really clever. So from, the interpretation of the writing to the actual like physical production time and literally, I mean, everyone, not just the movement choreographer, the brass team, the guard team, the percussion team, like everybody's mishmashing and working together. And so it's kind of in galvanized the team in a really cool way. In this first year, it's been cool.
And the members are happy, extremely happy. Like they are, I mean, we did the photo shoot for costuming and uniforms, and Rick and I got to be a part of setting all that. It was really great. It was fun. We had the lighting, and it felt very, very famous, and we aren't, but it felt very cool. And, the gentleman walked in with their uniforms, and one of them said, I've never felt more like a Cavalier. And I didn't realize that was what the take was going to be. I didn't expect anyone to say that because our goal wasn't, we need to make them look like Cavalier. That's wasn't our number one goal. But the fact that I think that was the moment I realized as a team that we did our job, not just to create something extremely cool and extremely fresh and unique and so planned and methodical and thought out and calculated and sophisticated, but we also have the members feeling like the Cavaliers that they signed on to be. And that was a really big checkbox for me personally, and I know for everybody else on the team. We have members that really do, and Rick and I giggle about it because they'll come by and randomly walk up to us and go, thank you so much for this show. We love being in this show. We love being a part of this. And whatever. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. 17, okay. Those are just things that you can't take that away from anything. There's no number, there's no ordinal, there's no left box, right box that can change the fact that these members feel like a Cavalier to them, and that's important to them, and that they're happy. They're happy. So that's the biggest thing to me.
Yeah, when I talked to Matt Harloff this spring, he was like, all the things that Matt has done, and he's like, it's all about giving that student a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what you guys are doing. You're giving these Cavaliers a great summer. So thank you for your hard work on that. Rick, when you were talking about all of that process, again, you sort of inferred the same thing that Kevin said a minute ago, which is, and then maybe, when we do this again, a little fewer bumpers, right? Because we have done it and we know where we're headed and we've accomplished this and now where are we going? So it's very interesting the concepts you guys have shared. I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well, and two, I think, well, I was just gonna tag on to that,
sure.
like, because the vibe is so kind of synergistic at this point, like, you're in spring training and someone has a cool idea, like, what if we did something like X, Y, and Z? So like, then you start stockpiling like future shows already, so,
Sure.
you're in the middle of the one you're working on, but then you love the creative banter so much that you already start like throwing some new ideas out there. So, coming away from this season, I think, the most important thing, like Lindsey's saying, the experience for the members. I think success is a long game, no matter how you look at it. I think everybody's always looking for an instant fix, but the actual fix can be permanent if you look at it a different way. I look at, okay, so if we create an experience that every single one of these members want to return to, then they'll be that much more experienced next year or the next year. If we create something that is so identifiably its own thing, then people will be attracted to that for what it is because of its vibe or its coolness or its whatever. So then, then talent is coming into that. And so just by the nature of planning better and doing right by them, the member maturity and craft and skill is going to grow over time. So like the tools then that you're able to work with can also grow. So like we're able to do more, they're able to do more. So then I think success becomes like I don't want to say it's a given, you know what I mean? But if you're looking at it as we need to do that one thing right now that's going to work for right now to give us the most success, sometimes it doesn't do all those things. You can rehearse a team for 8 hours in San Antonio and they might get better, but they also might not like that experience and want to do it again, and they might look for other things. So I think what the drum corps done really well is take care of them both on the field and off the field. Because that's the first thing that I preach to everybody is like, we're going to be successful. We're going to, we, like I already said, we checked off all of our objectives for this season. High five, everybody. We did it. Now let's enjoy the last 3 weeks and get as good as we can and see what happens. And that's fine. But if we did all the other internal things too, then that membership talent's going to grow. Our ability to work together as a team's going to grow. And then so success becomes a natural progression, I think, versus a one-sided point of view. It becomes a holistic internal strengthening that enables for that success to come. And then because we've honed in on processes, then when that's, then you're able to sustain a certain level of success, I think, at that point when you're doing all the internal right things. So
moving up 4 places was not on our list. That was never talked about. It wasn't discussed. It was not.
Right.
That's a short-term success goal that you're not even in control of. We're in charge of the long game. We're in charge of long game. And talking about we're going to not be this and we're going to be this and we're going to take down. I mean, that's a short game jargon. And none of us are short gamers. We're just not wired that way. And we had to come into this knowing it was a long game. And all that to be said, we're doing really well in the short game because our goal was the long game. And and people are happy and members are happy and the staff is happy. And Daniel, our core director, is a 12 out of 10 on every scale. And what he's done he won the off season, if there was a game at that. What Daniel has done for this organization in such a short time is absolutely mind-blowing. And what he's going to continue to do for us is just going to continue to give us the opportunity and vehicle to do what we need to do here.
Yeah, Daniel's awesome. And if you're a band director listening to this conversation, you're trying to figure out how to grow your program over the next 5 years, you need to rewind the last 8 minutes and listen to that again. Before we go, Kevin, I want to ask you a question about building the sound design for this show. Were there specific concepts or sounds or things that you used because of the shaping nature?
Yeah, I think there are some, if you really took a microscope to it, you would find that there's a little bit of an identity to some of the sound design in some of the connective glue. I think when I think about sound design, I don't really just think about samples and that sort of thing. It's almost like how everything functions together to tell the emotional story that it needs to tell in that moment. So for example, I was having a chat with the team about, how like if we, let's say we have a big full chord at the end of any given production, is there a way to give each one a different bit of a character, right? Via what's happening with the synths or the samples or the way that we finish it or the way we get into it, and having those kind of discussions with the entire team. I would argue the sound design is just a part of that. And, I think that one of the uses for that tool is also once the visual realization comes to life and you hear the soundtrack, there's a lot of sound design that can get pre-planned, and then there's a lot of other sound design that's like looking at the actual like film and cleaning up the seams in such a way that what you're watching feels like you're engaged in what you're watching via the soundtrack. And those are some of the tools that maybe not every acoustic member has access to in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, because in a perfect world, we could achieve that acoustically, but the reality is that they're also creating the visual. And so once the actual movie is out there on the field, we take another pass at the sound design, which I did, halfway through the summer, to like really kind of, it's almost like putting on that last layer of spackle and just like making sure that everything feels super cohesive and connected and everything feels like it's a part of the same package. And so, at least for me, my approach to sound design isn't to just put sprinkles over the top. I think of it more as like caulking the seams of the building, if that makes sense. Just like
Yeah, that's
making
great.
sure that all the finishing and all the dressings, everything feels like it's one final product that you can listen to holistically.
So this is probably not a very fair question, but could you give me an example? Is there something I can watch in the show where you went back and spackled or fairy dusted something to make that visual moment be a more of a wow? Can you give me an example in the show?
Yeah. So for sure, the end of movement one, right? We have kind of a sonic shift from we go from like a big F major chord and it kind of builds into a tritone and then resolves. And then there's a resolution where we finish and then like there's reverberation visually with the members kind of dissolving and then the props kind of do a gentle shift. And then we have a big rousal into this like impact. That's all connected now. It used to be a stop and then a start, and now it's all fully connected. And it's almost like emotionally, as I was creating that part, I want to think about, okay, we have this a lot of energy and then we let it fall and it like kind of sinks and then but it breathes for a second and then it lifts back up. That's what I saw in the video, right? Once they kind of did it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to figure out how to make it sound like what I'm experiencing visually. And that's always like the fun part of my job is like that creativity of like, I'm always like the guy that's send me a video, send me a video. Because as soon as I see it, I know what it should sound like.
And I think for band directors as well, like Tim, you said, if you're a band director watching this, I think it's really, not every band can do this, but if you can be patient with your sound designers a little bit of, the synths need parts. We're not going to have, two kids stand there for 2 months with nothing to do. You still have other jobs and they need parts and you got to do that. But when we're talking about like the caulking of the seams, like Kevin is talking about, allow them to watch the video and allow them to take it in. You're asking them to caulk something that isn't built yet. You're asking, what color paint do you want on this? And you're like, I don't know, where's the wall going? And they're your sometimes we ask our sound designers to answer the questions, to give answers to questions they don't even have yet. And so if you're a band director watching, be patient with those. You don't have to have every seam filled in the month of July or August even. You can let it, you can get it fast or you can get it correct. They don't always go together. So I just say that, and Kevin owes me now $25. I'm kidding. I just bought him 2 weeks on a couple of clients, but
Yeah.
I do think it's imperative though, where that's where it starts to feel really holistically thought through, is that you didn't rush it. You didn't just go, well, just put a riser there. And it's like, oh my God, it's thoughtful, and give your sound designers time to elevate what's there, not fill space. That's not their only job.
Yeah,
And I think that's another challenge. And I think you can encourage your teams to say, with the sound design element, like I said, it's I think it is evolved to a point where it's not just a separate entity. It has a conversation with all the other elements, both the brass and the percussion and the visual, right? I that's what I like to think of it as. It's a conversation. Everything is feeding off each other. Like you can't, it's not a zero sum game. Like if you put something in, then it's going to cover something else. So it's a trade-off. You know what I mean? So I should have said it is kind of a zero-sum game. So when something goes in, something might have to come out, and vice versa. So when you just slap sound design on top of something that already exists and is already crafted, we have to make sure that there's room for that. And I think that's also the other part of this conversation. There's been moments of the show where it's like, hey, I think we probably need to thin this acoustic thing out, but we can kind of bolster with sound design to make up for that thinning out acoustically, and vice versa. Like, hey, we're going to add this acoustic element. I think maybe I need to back off the sound design so that it doesn't, overshadow it. So, back to your question of give you some spots in the show. I think if you looked at all the seams between like the movements proper, that those were the biggest projects that I kind of put some finishing touches on the last couple of weeks.
And
Yeah,
they're
I
all
love the-
shaped 50.
Yeah, and I love the way you guys just described this because to me, in my band director brain, it's sort of like I'm detailing the show, right? And okay, I think this moment needs a little horn flash, or let's add a horn flare, or what I mean. And the same thing here. Can we do that with this new tool that we have? Kevin, I think you just gave me the best description of why sound design is helpful to a show that I've ever heard. So
Yeah.
I'm loving it. That was really good. Okay, we're going to go around. I'm going to let each of you say a final thing. Anything you want to say as we're closing this conversation, because I know Rick needs to get back to practice. You guys all have things to do. You're so kind to stop and talk to me and share all this information. Lindsay, I'll just randomly start with you. Anything you want to say about the season or the core or anything?
Oh man. I love it here. I I'm glad that Rick talked me into it because it did take that, right? I mean, I had said I'm not doing drum corps, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it. And then how Rick posed it to me was exactly what I needed, and I would never turn back time. It's exactly where I want to be right now. And the holistic, my favorite thing of the season is the absolute holistic approach that everybody has to the thing. I feel like everyone is on the same bus driving in the same direction. Now, sometimes one seat, we move this seat and this person goes to this seat and this person goes to this seat for that week, but we're all on the same bus driving the same direction. And there are very few teams I have found that can do that. And I feel like we do that well. So.
Yeah, and everybody has to be all about the show and not about their ego. And
Yes.
that a lot of people accomplish that, but a lot of times that's hard. Kevin, what would you like to say wrapping up? Any final thoughts?
Sure. I think Rick had a great conversation about investing in processes. And I think that, anytime you have year number one, there's all the processes that need to be established, right? So, for example, setting up a brand new sound system, coming up with how we're going to balance the microphones, how we're going to navigate that relationship between the staff on how we're balancing things, right? Like all of those things that like we've invested into this year get to pay immediate dividends next year. And so that's just one small example. So I would encourage, anyone listening to this, like double down on investing in your processes because they will pay off every single year. And that will eventually chip away at that lead time that you have to getting to that standard of excellence that you want to get to, And so I really truly believe that we invested in those processes this year, looking for the long game, looking forward to the long game. And I think the staff is fully on board on that. And I think to me, that's been the most special part about this experience so far is that the willingness for everyone to just start with the clean slate and say, okay, we're going to build our sandcastle one step at a time, knowing that some of those are going to require a massive upfront investment this year, but we're going to enjoy the fruits of those labor into the coming years and beyond.
Yeah, same concept that we were talking about a minute ago where Rick was talking about that, taking that time to let it grow and develop. All right, Rick, you're going to get the final word. What would you like to say?
Oh man, I agree. I love it here. I use the statement, come have a good time teaching with your friends. And, it has felt like that. And, the whole organization has just been welcoming. And yeah, I feel at home here and I'm loving it. And it's the most fun I've had in like 20 years. I feel like a kid again, just having, geeky talk with my friends about all the cool stuff we can do and make together. It's going to be fun. Um, but I think two things that I love about this is that I love the I love the total composition visually and musically of the show. I love that, there are moments that are super strong, but it's not just a moment. It's not random acts of skillful pageantry. It's seamed together in such an evolutionary way over time that you can tell that this composer, that this arranger, that this drill designer, that this choreographer, that everybody took a lot of time in the crafting of how it was put together. You know, and so I think that the students respond to that. They can see that someone spent a lot of time on the color story of the show so that it looks, there's a craft to it all that feels buttoned up. And that I feel really proud of. I feel proud of the work. It's like if I was a shoemaker and I made every piece of it by hand, and this is my handmade thing that took me a year and a half. There's a craft to it all that feels like that to me. And that's what I'm most proud about, is that it feels very, 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 very well crafted inside and out. And so I appreciate that. And then, my final thought is that I've been around this activity for a long time, and I have friends at every single place, and I love them. And I love to support what they do. I know at this point that we're all making things that we love. Every single drum corps is out there making something that's precious to them. The members invest time, the core invests money, everyone invests just so much passion and love and the artistry of it all. And you can feel that, in that's why there's so strong identity from group to group. And we're just one component of the larger scale of that. I know that we live in 2025 where it's so easy for people to downplay other people's efforts. And so, for me, I'm always one of those people that's like, if you're going to have an opinion, then you need to get in the process. It's like everybody on my team. It's like, if you're going to have a strong opinion about that, then you got to be willing to get in there and do the work. You can't just text it to me or send it on the phone. You got to get in rehearsal and you got to help me do this thing. And so I would say to like the greater society is like, how is it supporting the activity to downplay someone else's efforts? You know what I mean? To verbally go into internet spaces and to speak ill of members and their work and their efforts and performers and designers, it's not helpful at all. And then I would ask the larger community of negativity, did you buy a t-shirt? Are you supporting a core? Did you donate to them? Are you buying tickets to go to a show? And so, I feel like that in 2025, there's a resistance to the negativity in the world, especially in pageantry, because I think we understand that what we have is precious. We understand that what we have is so niche and special, and it's only made by people that come from this. You know what I mean? Each one of us who make this have marched and put in the sweat and grown, and the failures and the triumphs and all those kinds of things. And that's who makes all of pageantry right now. And so I think within our community, there's a high level of respect for other people and the love of what we do and what we make. And I just hope that as the years go by, that the people who are not necessarily in the trenches making the art and doing the work are finding ways to support it in positive ways, of support, because I see kids out here every day, working so hard, losing tremendous amounts of weight, doing reps upon reps in the hot, sweaty sun, drinking out of a cooler that tastes like plastic or something. You know what I mean? Like, they're working the same way that we all did, whether it was in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. Yay, my team. But the kids are still working hard, and they're still finding ways to love it and to do it for the same reasons that everybody who's ever done this did it. And so I think my wish that as the larger community, that there's more of this, the love and appreciation for the work and we can be competitors. I can still want all the points and want my friends' teams to be incredibly good too. And so I think we're learning, competition can cause it to be weird psychologically. And I think as the world shifts around us and as everything is kind of whatever evolving, I think we're finding new and better ways to love what we do and to support it and to keep it going for the next generations. But knowing that, everybody's doing all of this out of love. I'm hoping, Tim, that you're making these podcasts out of the love for, one, just talking about what it is, but to share with other people. That's all we're doing, is sharing what we love about this, what we love to make, how we love to teach. That's all we're doing, is just sharing it with each other. So I hope that we're all sharing the best of ourselves, and not the negativity. I think there's too much of that in the real world. So that's my plea. That's my putting it out there into the universe, is that we are finding better and better, more positive ways to support how we do what we do. So
Yep.
No doubt about it. And I don't think anybody could listen to this conversation that we just recorded without being really inspired. And it makes you want to go see a drum corps show. So everybody go buy your ticket, buy the t-shirt, go see Corps live, support it. Thank you guys for all that you're doing and for taking all this time to talk to me in the middle of your busy, busy summer. So Lindsey, Rick, Kevin, you guys were absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks,
Bye,
Tim.
Tim. Thanks, everybody.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.